Pride, greed, lust, wrath, envy, gluttony, and sloth. How does an animal named after one of the seven deadly sins, whose sluggishness and lethargy are almost legendary, how does an animal such as this evolve and survive, where so many other seemingly fitter animals in the history of the world have long since gone extinct? Binomial name Bradypus variegatus, the brown-throated three-toed sloth is a medium-sized herbivorous mammal that lives in Central and South American rainforests. Sloths live a sedentary and almost entirely arboreal lifestyle, spending their lives hanging from the branches of rainforest trees. They sleep anywhere from 15 to 20 hours each day and awake by night to feed on the tender leaves, shoots, buds, and occasionally fruit that consist of their diet. Physically, three-toed sloths are approximately half a meter long in adulthood, and they weigh an average of 8 pounds on an empty stomach and up to 12 pounds when full. That's the basic description of sloths, and I know what you're thinking, and you're right. They are not impressive creatures. But behind the mellow cuteness of this mammal lies the truth, that sloths are evolutionary marvels that defied the trends of their ancestors to evolve ingenious adaptations that allow them to survive as well now as they have for millions of years. Recent fossil evidence has given us insight into the evolutionary history of sloths. The findings have been surprising, to say the least. Sloths are part of the superorder Xenarthra, which includes modern anteaters and armadillos. This superorder emerged on the plains of South America about 60 million years ago. Modern sloths are tree dwellers, but the sloth order of species first emerged at, and for many years most ancient sloths were, ground-dwelling grazers. Over time, the overarching trend in this group of sloth species was to get bigger, to stave off the threat of predators by being too big to tackle, to the point where 10,000 years ago, the 4-ton Megatherium americanum, a sloth the size of an elephant, roamed the plains of North America. Unfortunately, ground-dwelling sloths went extinct around 10,000 years ago with the arrival of humans in North and South America. Tree-dwelling sloths reflect the two separate instances where ground-dwelling sloths migrated and adapted to a rainforest environment. They are the black sheep of the sloth evolutionary family and are one of the few instances in nature when the modern species does not reflect the evolutionary trends of its order. In fact, this entire instance reflects the importance of looking at fossil evidence when discussing organisms' evolution. Without fossil records, we would never have known about the giants in sloths' evolutionary history. Like all organisms, sloths evolved through natural selection, the mechanism whereby evolution occurs, wherein the individuals in a population best adapted to their environment tend to survive more and pass on more of those advantageous traits to their offspring. The naturally selective pressures particular to the sloth's environment explain the seemingly counterintuitive set of traits that the species has evolved. As mentioned, modern tree-dwelling sloths are the descendants of medium-sized ground-dwelling sloths that moved to and then adapted to a rainforest environment. To be fast in a dense, dark jungle is to be noticed. To be noticed is fatal. It is the same with being ground-dwelling in the jungle. The concern of predation is at its greatest severity when you are on ground level. Therefore, the naturally selective pressures of the sloth's environment gradually selected for the traits that modern sloths now represent. Speed was not advantageous for ancient sloths. Even the fastest sloth could not outrun a jaguar or a harpy eagle. It was the slower, better camouflaged, more tree-dwelling sloths that remained unnoticed long enough to pass on those genes to offspring. It is those traits that the species was selected for. The sloth's greatest advantage is that it can survive by doing, and being noticed, little. To this end, the sloth has developed a number of ingenious adaptations. A sloth's diet is very nutrient poor. The leaves that they eat provide almost no nutrients, and even so, they eat little. To compensate for this, sloths have a very low metabolic rate, less than half of what you would expect for an animal of their size. This explains why they move so slowly. They also maintain a body temperature of between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius, and because the leaves don't digest easily, sloths have a very large, specialized, compartmentalized stomach in which symbiotic bacteria help break down the leaves. I think the most fascinating adaptation of sloths, though, is their fur. Sloth fur appears green because of a unique symbiotic relationship the three-toed sloths have with a species of green algae, Trichophilus welkeri, that is not found anywhere else in nature. In exchange for shelter in the coarse hair fibers of the sloth, the algae provides the sloth excellent camouflage. This symbiotic camouflage adaptation, in conjunction with the sloth's adaptations that mean it doesn't have to forage or compete with other animals for its diet, means that the sloth is virtually unnoticeable to jungle predators, which is what has allowed it to survive to the present day. Two-toed and three-toed sloths did not evolve into their current arboreal states together. Three-toed sloths split from ground-dwelling sloths 45 to 50 million years ago, while two-toed sloths split from ground-dwelling sloths at a much later date. Therefore, these two modern ancestors each adapted to their tree-dwelling lifestyle long after they shared a common ancestor, which is why it is so surprising at the number of morphological structures that are so similar between the two families of sloths. Each has developed long, hooked claws, coarse fur that runs from limb to torso, and symbiotic algae in their fur. Each of these traits, despite being so similar, differs fundamentally. This makes these traits analogous, traits that are similar in form and function, but that evolved completely separately. For example, the species of algae that lives on two-toed versus three-toed sloths are completely different. Two-toed and three-toed sloths are a great example of convergent evolution and analogous structures. Despite being so similar now, they evolved to be that way completely separately. In conclusion, we tend to think of evolution as a guided force that's selecting for the strongest, the fastest, the smartest individuals in a population. But the fittest individual in a species is not necessarily any of these things, as sloths go to show us. They defied the evolutionary trends of their ancestors, as fossil evidence has demonstrated, and in response to a unique set of naturally selective pressures, they made ingenious adaptations. These adaptations were in fact analogous with adaptations from another separate species, two-toed sloths. Sloths are a true marvel of evolution that shows that survival of the fittest doesn't mean survival of the smartest, the fastest, or the strongest. Sometimes survival of the fittest is survival of the most sloth-like.